Hi, I'm Aura, and I'm the host of Collective Mind, and I'm not sure if anyone's actually here yet, but I was ready, so I figured I would turn camera and stuff on so that, just in case anybody was here but not typing yet because they didn't know if I was here yet, or I don't know. Charlie's in my lap. I didn't know that I was that close to out of that. Am I almost done with the row? Oop. Well, see how close again, I guess. Well, I'm gonna pause this here until I get further into the rainbow blanket to see how much of the light blue from that I have left. So I guess I'll switch to the rainbow blanket. I did a better announcement on YouTube to see if that helps. Because I knew at least one person was coming. So, maybe they didn't see it. Hi, I'm back. Yeah, I didn't DM you or anything, sorry. Hi. What? What's OMG? Oh wow. That's a lot. Uh-huh. Well, I hope more people come. Because otherwise making this a Q&A was not the best plan. But I didn't quite have the energy for a game. So I figured I would do this. Uh-oh. I'm gonna need to put headphones on. Oops. Wait, it already connected? Okay, good. That's bright. It's very rude. How dare it be so bright? Ow. No, 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 no. Not that song. Oh gosh. Hey Ellie. Glad you could make it. How are you? It's okay. I didn't do another ping at first, because I had just done one like 15 minutes before or whatever when I asked the question, and I didn't want to do too many pings. My little burst of energy might be wearing out some already. That's not great. That makes sense. Oh gosh, that's weird to see my face look like that. Yeah. Maybe I'll just do this. Yeah. It might not be as bad as I thought it was. I don't know. Yeah, the lighting was red because I had Pandora open and the album art was weird color, so the whole screen was that color. And it was changing the lighting a lot, especially because I don't have my big bright light on. Yeah, it's really hard to let go of control like that. What? My picture, like, in the corner? What do you mean close? Hi, Kai. Oh, the microphone? I've been moving it closer lately to make my audio hopefully better. Sometimes I forget though. I don't know what I want to listen to. It's not this. I have a station. Why wouldn't I play that? Oh, that's very red. Well, I have like half a station. I don't know if I'll like that. We'll see. I'm working on the rainbow blanket again. I was working on a baby blanket earlier, but I ran out of one of the yarns, and I'm probably gonna use some extra yarn from this rainbow blanket for it, but I need to make sure I have enough for the rainbow blanket first. But it's the next color, it's like the light blue, which the light blue stripe will come right after this dark blue one. So, and I should have, I think I have 3 whole skeins of that light blue, like I should have plenty, but I just want to make sure not to run out for this. Because that baby blanket is more of like a scrap yarn baby blanket, so I could switch to like a totally different color instead if I needed to. Yeah, it can be really hard to see other altars as more than just different mindsets, especially if you're always watching, like I am and like I think you are. If you're always at least co-conscious and watching what's going on, it makes it a lot harder to think of other altars as that separate and not as just like me when I'm in a certain mood, or like me when I'm triggered a certain way or anything like that. And that was something that got easier with time, I think, but also with learning more about them. Because at first I only knew like very broad general information about different altars, and I only knew a couple of them. So like my distinctions between them were like, this is the one I associate with anxiety, this is the one I associate with anger. Like it was kind of that perspective. And then as I learned more about them, they became more like well-rounded people in my brain. Not like they became more well-rounded, but I realized how well-rounded they were. Like the way that I thought about them was more well-rounded, if that makes sense. And they became, like the way that I thought about them became more complicated than just their roles too. Which that might have been more so once I started learning about more altars, because I had to differentiate them by more than just roles, because there would be multiple altars of each role, so I couldn't think of like Jade as the protector, for instance, because we had so many protectors that I had to think of her as like more specific things than that. Just as an example. So that was mostly just time, I think, for me. Learning more about them for me wasn't just about them fronting more. That was definitely part of it, but it was also from spending time with them co-conscious and like working on internal communication and getting like learning more about them that way, where I would learn like, again, using Jade as an example. So if I know Jade is co-conscious and then I have a reaction to something that I wouldn't have expected myself to have, and then I kind of check with her and I'm like, hey, was that passive influence from you? And she's like, yes, or actually this other person's close now and it was them, or whatever. That would help me learn more about them too. But it also took time because they had to like learn to trust me. And I had to give them reason to trust me, like I had to be trustworthy. But that took time because they weren't used to telling me things. Like the whole point was to not tell me things for a long time. So it took a while for them to be at all comfortable with me knowing more than very general basic information. So that was a process. And I also, actually, one of the major ways that I learned a lot about a lot of them was watching them interact with other people while they're fronting and I'm co-conscious. So like I learned a lot about Jade from watching her talk to our partner system, for instance. Which again is specific to the way like things work in our system, where I'm always watching, but that helped me a lot. Yeah, that makes it harder if you don't have very good internal communication, for sure. That was a process for me because I wasn't used to doing that, and they weren't used to letting me do that, or like answering, basically. Yeah, I've heard of that happening before, especially when there's lower amnesia between alters, or between alters who are co-fronting or whatever, and the host specifically being always co. I've heard of like especially trauma holders not having their trauma memories while in front. Yeah, Charlie's in my lap snoring. I don't think you can quite see her, but she's right here. Like, this is me barely touching her head. So yeah, she's just out of frame. Sometimes she's technically in frame, but she blends in like with the chair behind me, so if she's like a tiny bit in frame, you can't tell. But she's right next to me. Yeah. That kind of trauma response can definitely make it harder. Yeah, she seems pretty out. She's been sleeping a lot today, but she sleeps more when we're having low energy or like a rough day generally. Because I think she's expecting to just kind of be in the same spot for long periods of time, so she sleeps more. I think we pushed a little bit too hard, more than once with the new wheelchair this week. Because we had several days earlier in the week where we had decent energy at the beginning of the day, and then like did some practice with the wheelchair either around the house or like did a short Walmart run or that kind of thing with the wheelchair, and then crashed really hard the rest of the day. For noticing that I'm going little, I honestly often don't notice until I hear my voice sound little. Or sometimes, like, I have certain little triggers that I will recognize will probably make me little, and that'll be the fastest way that I'll know. but sometimes I don't really notice, and like Onyx, for instance, will tell me that I'm starting to sound or act little, or start talking to me like I'm little, and then that usually makes me slide way faster. So, yeah. A lot of my emotions will get heightened, but they'll also be like less consistent. Like my whole mood can change much more easily and like faster when I'm little. Like the way that with kids they can be like screaming and crying and having the worst day of their life or whatever because whatever bad thing just happened, and then like you give them ice cream or a stuffed animal and it's suddenly the best day of their life, like that kind of thing. So like I think I can be comforted through hard emotions more easily when I'm little, if that makes sense. Like I respond better to comfort in some ways, assuming that I trust the person and feel safe. Oh yeah, I often try to argue that I'm not little, and it makes me sound twice as little as I did before. Yeah, it's interesting because like if I slide while I'm scared or sad, or because I got scared or sad in a specific way or whatever, those emotions will get stronger for sure. But it is, like I said, much easier to comfort me to a place where I feel better emotionally if I'm little than if I'm not. I think it's almost like an inside joke type thing, like a game in a way, for me to argue to Onyx, especially, that I'm not little when I obviously am. That's part of why I think a lot of us who age slide do it. Part of the function of it is emotion processing and like emotional regulation. That's also true. I will definitely try to Uno reverse you if you tell me I'm little. Yeah, exactly. Playful arguing. Oh yeah, I was talking about how we've probably been pushing a little too hard with the wheelchair since we got it. Which I think was partly like excitement. So if I had like any energy at all, basically I wanted to be using it and wheeling it myself and all of that. But it's gonna take me a bit to get used to using those muscles in that way, and to get used to doing any kind of like physical exertion consistently and all that again. No worries, Kai. You can talk as much or as little as you want to. Yeah, Ellie, it took me a while. Like, let's see. I had a few months, since I knew about it, before talking to Primal Pack for the first time. And then that helped a lot. Spending so much time with another system who was kind of further along in that process than us helped a lot. So, feeling like it's not enough trauma makes me immediately think two things. One is that it's very possible that you don't know all of it, which sucks to think about. But the other is trauma is very subjective, and the impact that it has depends on a lot of like contextual factors that will be different from person to person. And in a lot of cases, consistent quote unquote mild trauma has like a bigger impact on the brain than like one or two instances of severe trauma, if that makes sense, because the consistency is often what makes you like not process it. Because if you never have like a break from it, you don't ever feel safe enough to process it. So even if it doesn't feel like extreme, if there was a lot of little things, that adds up, but it also keeps you from processing things. So I guess I don't know what else to add to that. I guess try not to like minimize the impact of like frequency. If you felt consistently even somewhat unsafe, that's a lot. And like there are a lot of things that people don't even really think of as trauma that, especially if they're consistent, can be very traumatic. Major people in your life being unpredictable is something people don't think of as traumatic, but it is. Or it definitely can be, at least. Which is why it's subjective. Like, trauma isn't really defined by the type of thing that occurred. Trauma is the brain's reaction to whatever. So trauma is basically defined as whatever traumatized you. But I thought that a lot too, earlier on in knowing about my system. And I didn't know all of it, and I still don't know all of it, and I wish I knew less. Like, I don't blame any of the alters who shared anything with me, especially because most of what was shared in the context of them trying to process it and me just having to watch. But and I would have pestered them about it. I know I would have. And I would have thought that it would be better for me to know until I knew. And if I had an undo button and I pressed it, unless I remembered how bad it was to know about it, I would probably pester them again to tell me. Yeah, I wonder if we'll ever make a video about how frequently people minimize, even victims minimize psychological abuse. Or even, maybe especially psychological neglect. Or psychological trauma generally, I'll put it like that. It's not less bad. The only decent argument I think you could make for it being, for emotional being less in any way than physical or sexual, which are the other two major categories, is you could make an argument that physical and sexual inherently involve emotional. So it's like arguing that emotional is as bad as physical and emotional. But there's also different levels of all of those categories. For anxiety attacks, it's gonna be a lot of grounding and calming stuff. So things that make you feel safe, especially sensory things. Peppermint is something that helps us a lot. The smell of peppermint, because it isn't associated with anything bad. We like the smell a lot. It's a bit of an aggressive smell. It's hard to ignore it if it's there. So it's gonna be really grounding. And it opens your airways kind of. It feels easier to breathe when you're smelling peppermint. So that's one we like a lot. Charlie helps us, but I'm not gonna necessarily argue for you to get a service dog. But things that calm you down. If you have Like, especially if it's a longer attack or you're having trouble totally getting out of it, or you're trying to prevent one and you can feel it building or that kind of thing. Listening to music that's like calming and safe feeling, or watching a show that's really comforting, especially a familiar one, it helps us. Yeah, that kind of stuff. I know breathing exercises help a lot of people, but we don't like them. But they do definitely help a lot of people. Yeah, I think that was part of why I pestered people in my system to tell me more about our trauma. But on top of thinking it would be validating, I also thought it would be like practical for me to know to that extent, like what triggers there would be and stuff like that. And that has been helpful some. And some of the things, like if they had tried to tell me what some of the triggers were without telling me what the trauma was, it would have given too much away. Like, that's one of the things that's hard about trying to share triggers with people so that they can keep from triggering you, even if you trust them a lot, is to share some of them, you almost have to give some trauma information, which sucks. So, I don't know. It's hard. Yeah, some of our other tips would be more system specific. Like we could trigger a caretaker or a protector depending on the situation. Sometimes being alone is better for us, and sometimes being alone is worse. It depends on who is having anxiety and why. Because, like, sometimes it's grounding to have someone else there, and sometimes that feels less safe, so it just depends a lot. And it could depend on who the person is. Like, if it's me, and, like, Onyx is fronting for our partner system, I feel very safe and comfortable with Onyx. But it could just as easily be a trauma holder in our system who hasn't even met them yet. Like, anyone in their system. Or someone could be fronting for them who I don't know very well. And that would be very different than if it were Onyx. If that makes sense. Sure helps if I actually turn it around. Yeah, she's sleeping again. She shifted down a little and then fell back asleep. Ooh. Just sounded different. Who's here? A few people. Okay. You gonna want me to change the music? Not yet? Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. If there's like specific things triggering anxiety, obviously, if possible, solving the thing that's triggering it in some way can help a lot. That's not always possible, but sometimes there's like a halfway thing that's possible. Like if there are certain outfits that make you feel less dysphoric or things like that, that could help. Like if we're listening to music that's triggering somebody and making them anxious or giving them flashbacks, listening to different music or not listening to music anymore would be one of the things we would try to do. Communication with some alters sometimes is that easy for us, yes. Some of us have pretty good communication with each other most of the time. Usually alters who spend a lot of time near the front. But there will also be times where it basically totally goes away, usually when somebody's triggered. Because that's one of the ways that our like amnesia heightens essentially around the front if someone's triggered badly enough. Yeah, one of the ones close is also a gatekeeper, which helps. Because they were like actively assisting with some of the communication. And sometimes they'll get much more of like a general sense. Cause like, sometimes it'll be as vague of a sense as I'm like, this is one of the protectors. Like it took me a while to fairly consistently distinguish between Jade and Jaden. And I still can't always. And it depends, like, if I'm dissociating, like, a bunch of stuff. It's not at all uncommon for me to just be like, I think there are maybe people here, and maybe they're blurring with me, and maybe they're just close, and I'm not actually totally positive that I'm still the one fronting it all. But I think that maybe I kind of am. So I don't know. And there are alters who I have, like, no communication with at all. And sometimes I'll be able to tell, like, that someone is close, but I can't tell anything about them, or I won't even be able to tell that anybody's close. Just depends. Yeah, that makes sense. Working on communication definitely helped me. dissociating a lot now. Maybe I should change the music. I'm glad it's helping, Kai. Thanks for watching and hanging out. Good swing. Whoa. I'm glad you like it here. From a pack I DM'd you. I think Emily's still close too. I think several people are kind of blurry and trying not to switch, which is causing some disco. Yeah, I don't know that I want to leave necessarily. Depending on who switches, they might not want to stay. But they wouldn't need me to, like, preemptively leave just in case, so. I think I said mostly just that, like, communication helps me for sure. Do you mean something about forcing switches? I don't think so. I know I said something about internal communication depending a lot on the altar and the situation. So, like, some altars who are around the front fairly regularly have really good communication with each other and with me, into different levels. And then there are some altars who I have, like, basically no communication with. and I won't be able to tell who it is if they're close, or I might not even be able to tell that anybody's close. And then if someone's fronting and really triggered, our internal communication around the front kind of shuts down while they're really triggered. I think to keep, like, amnesia intact about trauma stuff. So, switching on purpose can depend a lot on the system. Some systems can do that, some of the time at least. Some systems cannot switch on purpose at all, ever. And sometimes that can improve with time, especially with communication. And lowering some of the amnesia over time and stuff. But, like, for us, it depends a lot on the situation. Some alters are much more able to forcefully take the front than others, and some are also much more able to stop anyone else from taking the front from them by force, if that makes sense. Like, Jade is one of the ones who's really good at both of those. But there are some, like, there's usually exceptions to a lot of those. Like, Jade can hold the front pretty consistently, but one major exception to that is if Alistair is triggered. Alistair being triggered to front will override Jade, like, pretty completely. Unless, like, Jade is triggered in a different specific way. Like, there's a lot of things like that complicate it. Jaden is pretty good at forcing their way out, but they're even better at, like, not fully switching, but blurring some or getting really close Kokon, and, like, deciding to some extent what we do and say without fully switching. Which is kind of hard to explain. It's almost like their passive influence is stronger than average. Yeah, if you're partly a gatekeeper, that would make sense. And I think you've said that before. That, you think you're, like, partly a switching gatekeeper. But also, the way that you're switching on purpose with them could technically fall under the umbrella of triggering them. Like, if you're proxying as them on Discord, for instance, and, like, trying to talk and act like them and doing things that they like that could be pulling them out. Cause, like, that's also pretty reliable for us. Like, there are some protectors especially who have very reliable triggers that I could, like, play a certain song or whatever and they will almost definitely front. And that was because of the trigger, not because I, like, pulled them from inside in any kind of, like, internal way, if that makes sense. But, like, I can also, depending on who it is, like, there are a lot of situations where say I want like Jaden's input on something, my internal communication is usually good enough with Jaden, and Jaden's is very, very good, that I could just be like, hey Jaden, this is what's going on. Do you want to deal with it, or do you care how I deal with it, or do you have a specific other alter in mind who you want to deal with it? And then they might just get really close and give input, or they might switch, or whatever. Yeah. Figuring out roles and stuff can be complicated for sure. Yeah, that could be a type of internal communication. It's not necessarily words. Like, a lot of the internal communication I can do most of the time is like ideas, not really words. Like, I don't get pictures. I can't think in pictures. Wow, sorry. And I usually can't get like specific words. Definitely not like full sentences. Usually. And sometimes it's mostly like emotional reactions. Like, I'll get a strong sense that like Anna found that funny, or that kind of thing. But I won't get much more than that. But sometimes, like, if the specific word choice matters to them, I'll like have a little bit of a back and forth, because sometimes they have better internal communication with me than I have with them. So I could like internally ask this word, this word, this word, this word, and then I'll be able to get like a yes or no more easily, because I'll get like a positive response or a negative response kind of thing. Yeah, that could be them being really close, co-con, or rapid switching, or them fronting and you being co-con, but you still feeling like a sense of control and agency and stuff, because you're not used to thinking of yourself as just watching, if that makes sense. I had a while where, unless someone explicitly told me that they switched and they were deciding stuff now, I would get enough like passive influence from them kind of while I was co-conscious that unless they did something dramatically different than what I would have done, I just kind of wouldn't question that I was doing it. Especially if we're not really making active decisions or talking or anything. Like, if we're just watching TV, the difference between watching TV from co-con and watching TV from front is basically non-existent for me. So I wouldn't even necessarily notice that I switched unless, like, I suddenly hear Jade's voice react to something or watch whoever switch on Plural Kit, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not fronting anymore. You know? If the sentences that you are typing have a mind of their own, it is very possible that the switch has already happened. And you're just watching that. Or you're, like, co-fronting. But, like, that was something I used to think, too. Like, I would write stuff, and I would be like, oh my gosh, like, that plot point worked out so well, and it even looks like I foreshadowed it and stuff, but I had no idea I was gonna do that. And then I found out later that Joseph was doing all of that writing, or, like, most, if not all of it. And that's why I would sometimes, like, open the story to write it and not think of anything for a while, and then suddenly have a bunch of ideas and start writing a bunch. That was when he switched. Where are you going? Charlie says hi. She woke up. She's clearly thrilled to be awake. Big yawn. Yeah. You still sleepy? Is it just the worst thing in the world to be awake? Oh, I know. Yeah, very confusing for sure. I'm glad. She gets so mad at me when I pet her tongue when she's trying to lick me. She gets really frustrated because she's like, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. I know. Oh, alright. Where are you going? Comfy? I can't tell if she's comfortable in this new position or if she's about to, like, get up and huff at me. Oh. That wasn't the plan. I don't even have a thing. I don't want to wear this stupid hat. How bad is her hair? It's fine. I don't care. Okay, guess I'm gonna make a picture. I have one saved on the computer, right? Yeah. Oh, that's small. I don't know how big it's supposed to be. Okay. Right. Charlie, what are you doing? What are you doing? Okay. We'll go down there. I gotta do this. Probably thirsty. We probably talk to ourselves sometimes too, but it's usually talking to alters, yeah. And even if it's talking to myself, it's very possible someone would answer me. I need to change this music. Although this song is almost okay. I'm gonna actually play my songs. Yeah, I haven't been on the channel before. I don't know if I particularly want to be, that's why I was trying not to switch. Because I haven't really decided how much I would share about myself. So for like a Meet the Alters or whatever, I don't know what I would say. I know Primal Pack was still here. I think they were gonna be right back. I probably could switch, it depends how badly I wanted to. I could definitely trigger someone. Well, I say definitely. I could almost definitely trigger someone. Ow. It was bright. I don't know how much I want to say about myself yet, but if you still had questions, like generally, that weren't about me specifically, I would potentially still answer some of those. It's okay if you don't have any questions. I'm listening to positive triggers. Yeah, ignoring it is not the best. Then again, we might not be the best. Like, host awareness transition to model after. A lot of songs will make us blendy, especially a lot of positive stuff. But some alters at least have specific enough negative song triggers, especially, to reliably trigger them out. But that's not a day-to-day method, obviously, because it's negative. So it has to be a situation that justifies negatively triggering somebody. I guess it's probably boring to just watch me listen to music. Yeah. Our host didn't used to always be Co. I don't think that's even been true since Aura became host. I think, at least at the very beginning of her being host, it wasn't true yet. I'm not really sure what changed that. I guess if you've thought of any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I might start wrapping it up. There's a bunch of other people close. Yeah. Or I would love to be able to go inside as well. It'd be a trade-off for sure, because we'd probably have a little more amnesia, because everybody who has good communication with Aura wouldn't be able to just ask her what's going on when they switch. But it'd be really nice for her to get a break. But yeah, I think I will wrap it up. I'm not gonna try to do the like outro stuff, so I'll just put the outro screen up for a bit. But thanks for hanging out.